Willie Sandry, the thoughtful upholsterer, and we're looking at all the detailed adjustments plus knife sharpening on the Consew DCS-S4 skiving machine. So a finely tuned skiving machine will give you these wispy thin offcuts and nice clean skives, but one that's not set up right will give you tears in the leather and other headaches that you don't need. So let's fine tune your machine. When you look at the overall machine, I think a lot of people get intimidated by the number of knobs, but none of them are hard to adjust. Let's start by looking at a couple of the simple ones that you'll use every day. The presser foot action is up or down, just like lifting the presser foot on your sewing machine. And to adjust the downward pressure, it's this knob. Quarter turn or so clockwise would increase pressure, and then retest. Of course, you'll always run your machine with all the protective covers in place, but we'll pull some of those off just to have a little better look. So as you start the machine, you'll see there's a drive wheel that rotates clockwise, and the bell knife itself will rotate away from you. Let's pull off that presser foot to have a little closer look. Slide this retaining spring to the side, loosen the knob on the right side, and slide the bracket forward to release the foot and pin. And then you can clearly see the relationship between this egg-shaped drive wheel and the sharp edge of the bell knife. Make sure the spring tensioning bracket is in this position. If it's up hooked on the side of the machine, that's a neutral position, and there won't be any spring-loaded action on this, and that's something that's required for normal operation. So drop it down into one of those notches. Typically I'll have it in the second notch from the end of the bracket. To adjust the distance between the drive wheel and the knife, we'll use this knob. Clockwise in will actually increase the distance, or counterclockwise out to narrow that distance up. And that's one of the adjustments you'll use very frequently on this machine. And typically when we're setting up to skive thin chrome tanned leather, the spacing there will be about 1/2 millimeter. Now I'll actually increase that gap with the knob we just adjusted. And in addition to having the spacing between the drive wheel and the knife correct, you also want to make sure that those curves are concentric. And to do that, the adjustment is just here. And you can see if we just grossly misadjust that, the gap will be tighter on one side, and the opposite way is true as well. So you want to take some time and fine-tune that adjustment as well. And so you can see that drive stone moving front to back, and then let's get that a little bit closer on our spacing so we can further evaluate that. Just sighting down the end, too tight on the back, a little too tight on the front. So I'm just using both knobs in conjunction, kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch, to dial it in right where I want. So the spacing looks nice and even now. The drive wheel is touching the blade across its full width, so we'll reset that gap to about 1/2 millimeter, and those settings are all done. We talked about this spring-loaded bracket that gives this whole side assembly the action it needs, and you can see that drive wheel move away from the knife. And so that has to be kept under spring tension, but there's a second spring tensioner just here, and the knob that controls it is right here. Usually that knob stays cranked down all the time, and the action it has is to let that drive wheel tip down away from the knife, so obviously you want to keep a fair amount of tension on that. Okay, let's go down the front of the machine and identify the rest of the knobs. This is a securing knob for a waste feeder plate inside. It reminds me a little bit of a chip breaker if you've ever seen a woodworking hand plane, but it just helps to steer the waste away from the blade, and you can visualize it if you look under the machine inside the knife. Moving down the line, these two work together. This is a clutch to actually turn on the grinding wheel, and this advances the position of the grinding wheel to sharpen your bell knife. Finally, this hand crank is one that you'll probably use the least. It would advance the whole bell knife forward in the case that it's been sharpened many times and it needs to be slightly repositioned. So just to recap, these two knobs will generally be left in their factory position, while this knob along with this clutch lever will be used in concert to sharpen the bell knife. You can turn this knob about 1/2 turn clockwise to move the grinding stone a little further from the blade. And then just go ahead and pull this and drop the clutch lever down. Realize it's a very short throw, so that's all it has to do is move in the down position to start that grinding wheel. As you press down on the foot pedal, you'll see that grinding wheel spin, but it's not in contact with the knife yet. My grinding wheel looks a little bit dirty, so you can use the grinding wheel dresser to clean that off a little bit. So don some safety glasses, and without much speed and a very light touch, just clean up that grinding wheel. Okay, that looks a little better, and really that's no different than how you would clean up a shop grinder. Now we'll start the machine spinning again, and we're going to back this knob out counterclockwise very slowly until that grinding wheel starts to engage the blade. And it makes sense that you would find it by turning counterclockwise because the grinding wheel is already further away from you than the blade. Slowly advance that counterclockwise. Once you first start to hear it grind, give it a little more and let it spark for 10 or 15 seconds. And then back it off by turning again clockwise. Make sure that's well clear of the blade for the next user, and you can stop. The last step to sharpening your bell knife is to use this fine grinding stone to remove any light burr that may have developed on the inside of the blade. Use a super light touch with that and keep the grinding stone parallel to the inside of the blade. And that's all it takes. And remember to disengage that clutch so the grind wheel won't be turning when you don't need it. Now the knife is razor sharp again, so make sure to keep your hands well clear. With the belt covers removed, you can see a little better how the clutch system works. It's really a remarkable bit of engineering that all this is powered by a single motor, but here you can see the clutch is disengaged, and then we'll drop the lever to engage the grinding wheel. And you can see that pulley moves over, and that's what starts the grinding stone. There's an extra groove on the outside like a hand wheel on a sewing machine, but don't let that confuse you. The 3/8 inch groove that you want for your motor drive belt is just here. And remember to keep all of your cover plates in place whenever you're using the machine. And one end of this small cover plate is beveled to match the shape of the feed roller, so make sure the right end is facing in. Reinstall the presser foot with pin and lock that in place. And slide the spring tab back over in front of your foot. And the final adjustment we'll talk about is this knob here. This helps to control the angle of the presser foot. So just like the feed wheel, the presser foot needs to be concentric with the knife. And that's easiest to visualize if you drop the presser foot down and just make small adjustments. And that looks pretty good, so we'll tighten up that lock nut. And we'll reposition the guide. Usually I'll set that about 3/4 of an inch back from the front of the presser foot for about a 5/8 inch wide skive. And you might notice that normally the blade is aligned with the right side of the presser foot, so if there's a drastic gap there from years of sharpening, you might have to adjust the overall position of that bell knife. And remember, we'll do that with this knob once that's required. Well, ladies and gents, she is sharp and cutting good now. Now this looks great, but if yours is taking off a little more than you like, try decreasing the space between the feed wheel and the blade, or a little less pressure up top. So the basic adjustments on this Consew skiving machine are super simple, but even the detailed adjustments or knife sharpening are pretty easy if you just take it step by step.